This episode of Wellness with Delaney is sponsored by Zen Principle. We all know the feeling. It's 10 a.m. and that first cup of coffee is starting to wear off. Cue the crashing energy levels and total lack of focus. So you find yourself reaching for a second cup just to take the edge off. And then around mid-afternoon, you start to feel that same familiar crash coming on. So you reach for your third. And then suddenly you realize you are stuck in a doom cycle of chugging more and more coffee just to make it through the day until you're on edge, jittery, and wishing there was a better way. Me personally, yeah, I've been there, but I recently found a solution that not only gives me that burst of energy that I so badly want, but it actually supports all day energy and focus without the crash and without the jitters. Meet Zentelligence Ultra Focus Nootropic Supplement. This comprehensive 8-in-1 formula supports cognitive function through multiple pathways, targeting focus, memory, energy, and mood support. Featuring powerhouse nootropics like organic lion's mane, alpine galangal extract, acetylcholine, ginkgo biloba, water hyssop, L-theanine, and caffeine from green coffee bean extract. This supplement right here is a simple but powerful way to battle daily brain fog in the short term while also working in the long term to support the longevity of your cognitive health. So where a cup of coffee might give you a burst of energy for 2 hours followed by that horrible dreaded crash, Zentelligence provides up to 5 whole hours of balanced and focused energy completely crash and jitter free. As a busy health and wellness coach, content creator, and podcaster, I just don't have time to feel exhausted. So Zentelligence Ultra Focus Nootropic Supplement has everything I need for better energy, helping me maximize my productivity, but most importantly, doing so naturally and without anything artificial or shady. As a very holistic ingredients freak, this is something that I actually feel good about. And here's the deal. Unlike so many other supplements out there, Zentelligence is research-backed, using very clearly disclosed dosages for optimal transparency, and it's made in the USA in a GMP certified facility, which is basically a fancy way of saying it undergoes the highest level of scrutiny and standards to make sure you're actually getting the highest quality ingredients and benefits. So what the heck are you waiting for? Break up with that afternoon crash and shop Zentelligence using Delaney for 15% off. The link is in my show notes, so make sure to check it out and start giving your brain what it really wants. Welcome back to Wellness with Delaney. Today we have Susan Johnson. She is the founder of the KICKcancER Movement. She's also the owner of Biodynamic Wellness. Today is all about family health, pediatric cancer, what we can do as a society to naturally, holistically prevent and also live with this world where I think it's 1 in 2 people are projected to get cancer now. Like, that's crazy. So I really want to bring some holistic expert perspective to this major problem, and Susan is just the person to have. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, you're right. Those statistics are scary. It's alarming.
It is very alarming. And I think today too, just with all the news around glyphosate and Roundup and the fear that I'm seeing all over the internet and in people's lives, I'm really excited to chat about the nitty gritty and just learn what we can do to really help ourselves and help our families, because I know that that's something that's really big for you. Would you mind starting with just your background? Like, how did you get into the world of pediatric cancer?
Yeah. So my son actually, believe it or not, was diagnosed with cancer right before his third birthday. But the crazy part was I was already a functional practitioner. I had a private practice. My job was to help my clients be healthy, help them mitigate disease and illness and be as healthy as possible. And so when my child, right before his third birthday, was diagnosed with cancer, it floored me. And he went from breast milk to bone broth. Like, the child
Mm-hmm.
was healthy. We chose not to give him any vaccines. And so it was really one of those situations where it was like, really? Like, how did this happen? And I love the conversation we're going to have about environment, because I've learned now, a decade later, how much that can play into our situation. But he got diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. We were thrown into standard of care. Learned really quickly that the only option when you're under 18 is that you are required to go through chemotherapy, surgery, radiation, if that's part of the protocol. And if we were to leave that option and go and do something naturally or holistically, we would risk him becoming property of the state and us getting arrested. And that was alarming. Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that like in the United States, Canada, and other countries, that it is required that you follow standard of protocol, standard of care, I should say, in children's oncology group protocol if your child is under 18.
Oh my gosh, we definitely need to dig into that today because that is blowing my mind.
Yeah, it's pretty gnarly. And I will say this though, for those listening, is I always want to give like hope over fear. And I will say that what we experienced, I'm thankful now that we had this experience because now my work is to help families know they can help their child thrive through conventional treatment for cancer. And also teach them how to try to minimize the risk, of course, to begin with. But walking through chemotherapy, my son had chemo every day for 3.5 years between age almost 3 years old till 7. And he literally thrived, Delaney. Like he did so well. And that was because we implemented a really nutrient dense diet. We gave him certain supplements. We used plant medicine to minimize side effects and symptoms. We reduced environmental exposures in our home. We created a really healing environment in our home. We addressed emotions. And so there was a lot that went into this, right, that helped him do well, but it gave me so much hope to pass on to other families to say, this is possible. In despite the circumstance where we are feeling forced in a situation, it's still possible to help your child feel
Mhm.
well through it.
Wow. So with this, because I find this really fascinating, and I can see the justification that maybe the government would try to place on why parents need to do the conventional route. But also, I mean, there's so much money in the cancer business. And as somebody who is holistically minded, I'm like, that's just crazy. Do you think these rules are in place to protect children or to protect businesses?
That's a really good question. I want to believe that the rules are in place for that small population that may just think that they don't need this. We'll just keep them at home, keep them in school and not really be active in their health. And I want you to think about like the minority population that may be on a really restricted income and both parents working and they're like, well, we can't even get our kid to treatment today, so we're just not going to do it.
Mm,
So I want to believe that that's why those rules are in place is to protect children and with their best interest in mind.
yeah.
However, I also know that cancer is big business. And for example, there was a particular medication that my son got. It was about 5 mLs of this particular chemo. He ended up having an anaphylaxis reaction to, and we received the bill later. So they had to stop it after like 30 seconds of this infusion. He turned red, his lips started to turn blue. It was terrifying. And they stopped it like 10 seconds into the infusion, so or something like that. And we ended up getting a bill for it later. And insurance, thankfully, we had insurance at the time that took care of most of this. That 5 milliliters of chemotherapy was $80,000.
Wow.
$80,000. So yeah, there's a lot of profit in this industry, in this business. And so curing cancer isn't really at the top of the list.
Hmm.
And again, is that why the only reason these laws are in place for kids? I don't want to believe that, but I know that is something to really consider.
Yeah, it's so hard because I mean, ultimately, big drug companies can't profit off of natural remedies or people being healthy to begin with, right? And I feel like we're seeing so much now the people who sell the poison also sell the antidote.
Yep.
And it's pretty freaking spooky out there, if I do say so myself, especially somebody who's about to be raising a child. Oh my gosh. Okay, so walk me through. So you were able to support your son, which is so amazing. How did this then become a situation where you're helping families in masses support their kids through the same cancer treatment, just kind of craziness?
Yeah. So it actually started because, this was in 2013. The end of 2013 is when he was diagnosed. So 2014, I'm starting to kind of share our journey on social media. That was like, the beginning days of social media. Instagram, I would say. And I would use my blog and just kind of share. It was like a way for me to process and just kind of journal, right, what was happening. And all of a sudden, I would have families reach out that would find me and say, "This isn't the situation of my child. Like, I see your child thriving, and my child's vomiting every hour on the hour. They can't keep food down. We're impatient constantly." And so I would have these conversations with my husband, and he said, "Why don't we teach these families what we're doing?" And so his vision started as, "Why don't you bring the moms that you're in touch with, that you've been giving advice to, bring them to our house for a weekend, and we'll just teach them everything we're doing." I was like, "That's a great idea." Well, I took that, and I tend to be a little bit aggressive with like taking a really great idea and 10xing it. And so I was like, "Ooh, this is a good idea, but why don't we rent out a conference room at a hotel, put them in hotel rooms, and bring in not just me and you, but like bring in the experts that we're learning from to teach them. And then we'll provide
Wow.
childcare from nurses." And so it turned into this whole thing. And that was actually the start of KICKcancER Movement, which is our nonprofit. And we were so fortunate to have so many people, friends rally around us when Kicker was diagnosed and do fundraisers. And so we used a portion of the funds that were raised to start this and to pay for families to come to this retreat. And it was at that retreat, I just remember seeing like the importance of community and these parents seeing each other and talking to each other and crying together. And the kids, like bald kids, seeing other bald kids, and just the power of realizing you're not alone in this traumatic situation, and also being surrounded by other parents who realize that there is more they can do than just chemo and cross their arms and sit back and let the doctors do whatever. And so
Yeah.
it was a really powerful experience. And so we took that, and that was the birth, like I said, of our nonprofit. And then now that's turned, I have, through my own brand, just group coaching. I work with clients privately, and it's like my whole heart. I love
Yeah.
walking families through this journey.
I love this. This is amazing. And I love your heart behind it. Even the fact that this didn't really start as like a business, a business model to make millions and millions of dollars. It really is just a way for you to help people who went through such a hard experience that you've been through. And I find that so beautiful. And I think that just the world needs more of that. So then
Thank
kind of
you.
just, yeah, of course. So getting into, I would just love to hear. I know we kind of talked about how there is an environmental component when it comes to cancer, and I think people think about like, oh, well, I eat healthy, I work out. Why, like, you know what I'm saying? Or like, why are all these dogs getting cancer? Why are all these kids getting cancer? What is going on? What are you finding to be some of the major culprits in the rise of cancer rates?
So this is something that I'm definitely, now that I'm practicing clinically and working with clients one-to-one and doing functional testing and working really a lot with the pediatric cancer population, I'm seeing some common denominators in the environmental factor. And, first I want to say, like, I don't want anybody to leave this podcast like fearful and like, I don't know what to do. Or I think of you, Delaney, like almost a new mom and stepping into this world of like, how do I put my baby in a bubble and like keep them safe? There really is so much we can do. And it's all about education, right? Education is empowerment. And then we replace that fear with action. And so the common denominators that I'm going to share, and then I'll kind of explain how you can test for these too, so that you're aware. Um, Mycotoxins, which are toxins
Mm,
from mold, super common. And unfortunately, we're not just seeing this. I think before we had this understanding that like it's just in humid environments like Florida and Texas, or we would hear it's just in old homes, and that's not true. It can be in any brand new beautiful build. It can be anywhere, and it's a matter of testing, right? And so we'll talk about testing for that. Mycotoxins being number one. Number two, environmental toxins. So glyphosate, that's a big one. And when I do a glyphosate test on a child that has gone through cancer or is going through cancer, I mean, the levels are through the roof. And we know that glyphosate has been directly linked to cancer, which is why there's all of this effort to try to make it no longer exist in America. Some other
mhm.
countries have done that, and they're working on that. So glyphosate, and then the other environmental toxins I would say that we see are pesticides. And I'm talking about, yeah, sure, insecticides. Like I always tell families, don't use Terminex. Like, please don't use these insecticides around your house. But I mean the bigger ones coming from golf courses if you live near a school, a golf course, some of these areas that are highly sprayed with some of these pesticides are really toxic. And then the people that live near airports,
Mm,
that's another one where you see a lot of like the jet fuels and the different toxins that are coming from that. And then the last thing I would say is we've seen this uptick of people who are recognizing the importance of electromagnetic frequencies and radio frequencies.
yeah.
We have 5G towers all over, right? And while a 5G tower might not be the only culprit, we're coupling that with Tesla battery chargers on homes and smart homes and Wi-Fi routers and Bluetooth, and it's just wrecking our nervous system.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the common denominators that I'm seeing as the biggest assault in kids and adults that are walking through cancer.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting how you started with mycotoxins and ended with EMF because we also, we're learning that EMF also makes mold more aggressive. So it's this like cascade of one bad thing increases the horribleness of
Yeah.
another bad thing. It's just absolutely crazy. So then this, I think just hearing this, people are going to be like, holy crap, like I can't get away from it, right? I live in this world. You can control what you're buying at the store maybe, but you can't control everything around you. So then what do people realistically do to mitigate these environmental hazards?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So this is where the testing conversation comes in. And I believe like I want you to think about it as if you had a nice car. Well, your car in general, I don't care if it's nice or not. You need to take your car in to get the oil changed, right? You need to take your car in. Like my car right now is telling me it's time to come in for your like checkup. So we take our cars in to get them, checked on, make sure everything's changed, updated, and they're running great. We need to do the same thing with our body and actually our environment. So I love running toxin tests on my clients because this actually is kind of that first level of what's happening. So a toxin test will show me everything. The one that I run is called the total tox, is what the test is called. And it shows me mycotoxins, it shows me environmental toxins, and it shows me heavy metals, including glyphosate is on there as well.
Yeah.
So when I order this report, it's a urine test, super simple. And I get the report back of my client. I'm able to see this right away. If I see high levels of mycotoxins, I'm like, okay, now our next step is we need to investigate the health of your home. And this is where we can do a simple test to like, there's layers, right, of digging into this. So you could do a simple dust test at home. It's under $300 to get an idea of what levels may be elevated and if that is a concern. And if it is a concern, then we take, next steps to do deeper digging. It might not be the home, it might be the child's school. It might be the adult's place of work, right? So don't always just assume it's your home. So testing is really important. And then if I do see high levels of glyphosate or certain pesticides or heavy metals, I look at their water filtration. I look at where they live. And while moving isn't always an option, well, how do we optimize where you live? And that's where we talk about air filters, water filtration, right? Things that we can put in our home. EMF mitigation. There's things that we can help EMF not be as, we're not blocking it, we're not deflecting it, we're trying to make it less of an issue. And so we can bring these tools in to help the health of our environment. But number one, I always say is we got to test. We got to see what's going on. And you may have, if you're in a home right now and you don't feel well, or you're noticing patterns of illness in your family, that might be enough to do a mold test or test your environment to see what's going on, to find out. And I really do believe that played into my son's diagnosis. We found out later that the home we were living in right before he was diagnosed, we didn't find this out until we moved out. But the people who bought the home ended up getting really sick and they tore the master bedroom wall out and it was filled with black mold. And he slept with us a lot when he was little. And so I believe that was one of the contributing factors to his diagnosis. And so again, these are all just things to be aware of. And if you're testing, you can address it.
Absolutely. Do you find that children are more susceptible to these toxins than adults?
That's a good question. I would say, are they more susceptible? Sure. But are they more resilient as well? Yeah.
Mm,
Like they don't have as much accumulation of toxins because of their age and just their exposure. as adults. So adult with the same level of glyphosate and mold likely will feel worse and be experiencing more side effects, and it'll take a little longer to clear that from their system than it would a child who has a similar level. Their body is a little bit more resilient.
Hmm.
Then that goes into even deeper is nutrigenomics, which is the study of our genetics and epigenetics and knowing like this. And this actually, Delaney, this I always get the question, well, if our house is so moldy, why is my husband fine and I'm not? Or why is this person fine? And that has a lot to do with how we were made or how we were created, our DNA, our genetics. And so we test for this as well to know, like, oh my goodness, this is why I can see now my son was more predisposed to developing this disease because he had a deletion of his phase 2 detoxification gene, right? And so we can, and the report is powerful because it doesn't just give us information, but we can use that information to change the expression of those genes with lifestyle, cleaning up our environment, nutrition, supplements, things like that.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the analogy. I don't know if you've heard this, you probably have in your industry, but I did some time with an EMF protection company that's really more like biological optimization, called Aries.
Yeah.
And I love they had this analogy about how like everyone has a certain bucket, right? Like a different bucket size, like a toxin load before it overflows. And we all might have different sizes of buckets, but eventually if you keep just like adding and adding and adding, no matter what the size, eventually it's going to overflow, right? But that we see people like I know for myself, I'm very sensitive to mold, to EMF, to conventional products. Like I literally, if I'm somewhere at someone's house and they start spraying Lysol, like I have to leave the room. And where there's some people that might be totally fine. However, eventually, right? Like eventually it's going to come for us all if we don't do something about it. And so I think that's where it's so important to, even if somebody isn't struggling, let's say like someone feels great, but they're exposing themselves to all this, like this is still something to think about, right? Because we can never take our health or our, lack of disease, lack of feeling disease for granted. I mean, that's kind of my philosophy.
I 100% agree. And that's where you, like, even now. So then what are things you can do? Let's say you're not in a
Yeah.
place where you can get a test tomorrow and do all of this. Well, like you just said, then what do we do right now? What can we do every day to keep that burden low? To be proactive? Because yes, we all have that bucket and everybody's is different size. So without it getting to the point where it's overflowing, what are things we do to keep that bucket halfway full or less, ideally? And that's things like A, staying hydrated with clean water. B, then doing things that intentionally push out toxins like sauna therapy, castor oil packs, detox
Mm.
baths, rebounding. These are all really simple, pretty inexpensive ways to keep that toxic burden low, right? Or just sweating. If maybe you don't have a sauna, but intentionally work up a sweat to let the toxins come out through your skin. And if we do these things every day, we are keeping that toxic burden lower, and it's simple.
That's what I love. Yeah, so much of it is like, I mean, it is free 99 to go for a run or to jump or to move your, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
move your lymphatic system. Like it costs nothing. There are amazing expensive treatments. Like don't get me wrong. I love my expensive lymphatic massages and all this and that, but like you don't need that as a
Yeah.
baseline to be healthy. And I love that you mentioned that it's really not that expensive to keep detoxing. When it comes to foods, are there like foods that you really recommend staying away from when it comes to just cancer treatment, prevention, all of that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, number one, avoiding processed foods and processed sugars. Like that should go without saying. But we want to think of two things. We want to think of cancer is a disease that loves and lives and thrives in inflammation.
Mm,
So, what causes inflammation? Processed foods, processed sugars, seed oils all create inflammation in the body. Cancer loves that. Parasites love that. So, what reduces inflammation is healthy omega-3 fatty acids, like coming from butter, coming from wild seafood, coming from healthy grass fed, grass finished red meat, eggs. So, any of these healthy fats that we can get that counterbalance inflammation, amazing. So with kids, here's the thing, like kids, and you'll learn this soon, kids can be inherently picky. They get their little personalities and they start developing this, this little attitude. I will say for you, Delaney, if you like starting them young on real whole foods and you just don't give them a choice,
Mm-hmm.
you'll be good, right?
That's
It's
my
comparing
plan.
foods.
Yeah.
Yeah, and often like it's just simply just when you don't know better, how do you do better? And a lot of parents are told like give your kid rice cereal to start. Well,
Yeah.
that's like the worst thing to start your child on and creates this issue down the road with food and being picky. But a
Yeah.
lot of the parents I work with, their kid is not only inherently picky, but they're going through treatment that makes them feel like crap and their taste buds change. So we have to get really creative at the things that we can have them eat. If they love mac and cheese, okay, I get it. How can we make that as healthy and nutrient dense as possible? And one
Mm.
of my favorite suggestions is we'll take, and again, this is not a food that I would recommend eating all the time, but I'm working with these kids that we have to get calories in them. But we also need to deliver targeted nutrients like organ meats and butter and things like turmeric and garlic. And so if we can give them the Jovial, it's a clean brand of gluten-free noodles. We boil that in broth. So we're making the macaroni noodles in bone broth, right? Then we're making the sauce by adding like raw cream from a good, clean raw dairy. We're adding real butter. We're adding organ meat seasoning to that,
Mm-hmm.
turmeric, garlic, and now we're giving them mac and cheese in a way that is actually going to help their body heal. So when we think of foods that we want to avoid, it's all the processed stuff, but I always tell my parents, like, don't lose hope. I have got so many tricks up my sleeve after being in this field for a decade. I can turn pizza into a superfood. I can
I
turn
love
mac and
this.
cheese into a superfood.
I love this. Are you cooking with pluck or is there a different organ seasoning you're using?
Yes, pluck is the best. I love
It's
it.
so good. I am
It's so good.
obsessed. I sneak it into everyone's meals. If you come over to my house and you don't like organs, you're probably eating organs. Sorry. Like,
And you have no idea because that's the
mm-hmm.
thing is like you can't taste it. And a lot of I always say too with things like pluck makes it so easy because it's natural. It already tastes good. It tastes like
Yeah.
your taco seasoning or whatever you want. But I love encouraging my families to use dips. So like a homemade ranch, I have a great recipe on my website. So easy. A lot of kids like ranch. You can use like these dips and sauces as a way to also open up capsules of supplements and sneak them in,
Smart.
right? Like if they can't swallow pills or if they're being picky about it, like open up their magnesium and a little bit of ranch and they're dipping their carrots in it. Great. Good to go, right? So yes, we're using these awesome superfoods, but then make their favorite things a little healthier and you can use it to deliver supplementation and nutrients as well.
Yeah, honestly, even beyond cancer, I'm wishing I had found your recipes in my first trimester because it was really hard to eat animal based during those those horrible weeks. I'm like, this would have
Yes.
been really nice. I should have thought about mac and cheese and bone broth because that was one thing that I did eat a lot of was like the jovial gluten-free mac and cheese. I was living on that. It was not good. I mean, it was better, right? Better, but
Yeah.
now I'm really happy that that's over. But I'm wishing I'd found you. That'd be really smart. So, okay, then moving into also, I'm really curious about like vaccines, right? And so I'm actually currently getting a little bit of trouble about this one because people know I'm pretty crunchy, like very, very crunchy. And I'm very much like to each their own, whatever. I'm not gonna tell you what to do, but I can't help but bring the experts on who have something to say about it. And I think it's really interesting, like everyone that I'm having on the show seems to have kind of like different concerns when it comes to vaccines. I know you mentioned like that was not something you did with your child. Are you finding from a cancer perspective that there are any complications when it comes to vaccinating your kids?
Definitely. And I will say this, like I am so thankful we made that decision because I do believe that if my child went into this treatment vaccinated, he probably wouldn't have done as well through treatment because he was
Wow.
so much more significantly compromised. And the reason I'm saying that is based on the data of his genetic nutrigenomics report. My son is literally his highest areas of impact are detoxification, methylation, and mood and behavior. And if you understand nutrigenomics, that'll make more sense. But if you don't, that means that those three areas are areas that his genes need more support. So when you think of a toxicant like a vaccine, I think the intention of vaccines years ago was beautiful. The delivery and the formulation is horrific.
Mhm.
And so you think of something like this, it's a toxicant, okay? So we're injecting these kids without looking at their genetic makeup, without looking at their predispositions or comorbidities that became popular in COVID. Like, why don't we look at these other comorbidities, these other issues that could be problematic for their health before we just slap them with the, size one fits all protocol? So knowing that my son has detoxification need, methylation need, and mood and behavior, if I would have vaccinated him, I can't even imagine what would have happened to his body then going into a cancer diagnosis. He would have been a wreck because he's missing a detox gene, I should say. He has an entire deletion, which is not uncommon, of a gene. I see this all the time, by the way, in cancer kids. And I think one of the reasons we see cancer is when parents aren't aware of this, because we're not told to do nutrigenomic testing when our child's born, which, by the way, Delaney, one of my favorite tests, you should. It's called 3x4.
Okay.
Do it, because it just gives you so much information. And then if you work with a practitioner that understands how to really help you interpret it, you'll use this report for the rest of your child's life. And it's so
Amazing.
cool because even though now that I know he has this deletion, I have him on a protocol to make sure that he's expressing
Mhm.
correctly and that it's not a problem. So it's not just like I told you earlier, it's not just a report. We can change the expression of these genes through what we call epigenetics. So all that to say, vaccines, the idea is great. The delivery and not knowing these children's epigenetic or their nutrigenomic situation is horrifically dangerous because we're setting them up for failure if we don't pay attention to how are they going to process that vaccine. And unfortunately, we're seeing some of the scariest, most bizarre cancer diagnoses since the COVID vaccine. And not just kids that have gotten the COVID vaccine, but parents who did, either prior to pregnancy, during pregnancy, or even when the child was a baby.
Mhm.
And I mean, we're talking about brain cancers that people have never heard of before.
Wow.
And the treatments for adults, for example, the treatments that were natural, if you went to like an integrative healing center to do cancer treatment totally naturally, the treatments that used to work kind of on their own are needing this, and this layered in now because of what we've seen in the environment change since 2020. It's wild. And I'm not just talking about people that were vaccinated. I'm talking about just the population in general and the impact of what happened with the virus and with the vaccines. It's alarming. It's a deep conversation with amongst myself and my colleagues of like, dang, this is intense what we're starting to see. So I would definitely encourage parents, listen, if you've already vaccinated your child and you're listening to this going, oh my gosh, what did I do? There's still so much you could do to support your child. And I would say test so that we can assess and then address, right? There's so much we can do. And if you haven't vaccinated or you're like Delaney and you're about to have your first child, or you're thinking about starting a family, just do your research and know that like there's some pretty cool ways to naturally support your child, preventing certain illnesses and diseases, really with the things God gave us, and like using food and using supplements and creating a healthy environment for them to live in.
Yeah, I mean, breastfeeding, like, right off the gate, right? It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and this makes me so happy too because I'm fortunate where I think, when I was born, I don't wanna say how long ago, almost 28 years ago, everyone was getting vaccinated. Nobody really was. Maybe if you were fringe, this conversation was happening, but no one was really talking about it. So I think, most people my age at least have received some vaccines, but I stopped. I didn't get a vaccine past elementary school. Actually, the flu shot, my mom had like anaphylaxis to it and almost died. And then she was like, this is crazy. I'm not vaccinating my kids anymore. And so I actually went to a military school for a while. And because I was in the military family, my mom would get called because, the government is just very intense with vaccines. My mom would get called into school every single day to get pressure to vaccinate myself and my siblings. And she'd be like, nope, I'll come in every day if you want me to, but I'm not doing it. So I'm really grateful for that foundation. And then, like, also, I feel like for all the single people now, like I have so much more peace knowing my husband also is unvaccinated, especially when it comes to COVID. And I think in dating, if I were single, I would be actually picking who I want to procreate with. And that would be one of the factors, like, are you vaccinated? Because just knowing the impacts, I don't think I could even ever like create a child or marry somebody who like got all these vaccines just knowing what I know now. Like, is that crazy?
It's not crazy. It's actually kind of a joke amongst, my friends and I of
Yeah.
like, so never really did we think about arranged marriages for our kids until now. And I'm like, so
Yeah.
there's a few boxes I need you to check. But you're right. And just the damage at the mitochondrial level, right? The
Mm-hmm.
damage at the DNA level from things like these toxicants coming from mRNA and different vaccines. Plus, you're layering in, you already mentioned, elevated EMF exposure. And so this is the conversation people have to understand is us using the language of like, yeah, glad my spouse is unvaccinated. It's also because it's not just a one thing problem. It's not just the vaccine being an issue. Is we are living in a much more toxic world than when Delaney grew up, than when I grew up 44 years ago. Like I was, same vaccinated through elementary school, never again. The world has changed. Our environment has changed. It has become more toxic. And so now the vaccine issue is a bigger conversation because it's not just a vaccine. We're vaccinated in a toxic world, living in toxic homes with crazy smart homes, kids sleeping with baby monitors that are sending Wi-Fi signal all night long. Like we have to start with the things we can change, which sure, one, we can not get vaccinated. And then two, we can reduce the level of exposure in our own home.
Yeah. Also, okay, you touched on like the smart homes and the baby monitors. That's a tangent because I think it's crazy how much Wi-Fi is going into these nurseries. For you, what would you do instead if you were having a baby today to mitigate that?
So, I mean, it's funny because back, like my kids are almost 17 and 15, and I'm like, I never had a baby monitor. I mean, mind you, we never lived in a big enough house where like
Yeah.
our house, the biggest house we lived in was like 3,000 square feet. I didn't need a baby monitor.
Yeah.
Moms, I mean, listen, we hear, so to this day, if my kids get up to pee, I hear it, right? Like that is, God gave us this gift, I think, as parents to just be intuitive of like, we don't sleep great. Once you become a mom, your sleep just never goes back to like perfect. Um, so what I would say is this. Like I always explain to my clients, I need you to understand why you're doing this so that you're more compliant in actually adapting it and doing it. EMF and Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, all of this, you can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it,
Hmm.
you can't hear it. So we ignore it. We largely ignore the idea of this being a problem. What I wish people understood is if you could see it, it would be like the thickest cloud of pollution that you couldn't even penetrate through. And what that does to your nervous system, that's the biggest impact, is your nervous system is responsible for healing. Like your nervous system, when it feels settled, when it feels safe, what we call parasympathetic state, like it's calm, that's when your body then is able to go in and prioritize healing and detox and restoration and digestion. But if your nervous system is never feeling settled, your body can never prioritize restoration, balance, and healing. The biggest disruptor to your nervous system is the toxicity from electromagnetic frequencies, radio frequencies, and Bluetooth. And you think about kids as a baby, their brains are so volatile. They're so much more exposed to EMF and Bluetooth. And you have not only these baby monitors that are sitting and receiving a signal, you have the Wi-Fi pulsating through the entire home. You have smart cameras that are security. You have Bluetooth from the refrigerator. You have Siri or Alexa in your house. It is layered upon layered, and it is creating the most toxic environment to heal and to
Hmm.
rest. And so just unplugging your Wi-Fi at night, and I always say make your home as dumb as possible. You can still have security cameras. You just need to hardwire them.
Yeah.
You can still have internet. You just have to hardwire it. Or if you're not able to take that step, turn it off at night. Like
Yeah.
at the very least, turn it off at night.
Yeah, I'm so about that. And honestly, I feel like this is also just a great case for co-sleeping when it comes to all this too. I mean, people always ask me like, "Oh, are you gonna do that outlet? Are you gonna do that?" I'm like, "No, my baby's just gonna sleep with me." Like, there we go. That's one problem just eliminated. Check. Like, I don't know. That's my personal philosophy. To each their own, but it is so true. It scares me now. I mean, people talk to their houses and lights turn it on and off and like all these things, and I'm like, just from even beyond the toxic load from a human perspective, to me, I don't ever want to lose touch with standing up and turning on and off a light. Like, it's just these little things that I like. I think about watching Wall-E as a kid. Do you remember that
Yes,
movie? And
that's what
all
I was
like,
going to say.
yeah, it's scary. I'm like, I don't want to be so dumbed down that I have a robot doing everything for me. Like, let me be human and let me do things myself. And maybe that's a niche take, but that's my philosophy in life.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not, there's so many cool things about the convenience of the invention of and the acceleration of technology, but we can't let it replace our brain function and our
Yeah.
physical function. And that's what we're seeing happen at the cellular level of like it actually degenerating your health. One of my kiddos that I've worked with, unfortunately, he passed, but he was a little boy
Mm.
that was diagnosed with a pretty aggressive cancer. And I'm my job in when I'm first meeting with a client is to kind of put puzzle pieces together, get a really thorough health history on the child or the adult, and understand going all the way back to conception and pregnancy and an environment. And we figured out that this child was living in a home that had smart meters, which that read the power, for the power company. It sends
Mhm.
and receives a message to the power company. And then their gas meter was smart as well. And then in addition to that, and that was on the other side of his bedroom. And then the Tesla charger was also on the wall of his room.
Oh my
And
gosh.
as soon as I brought this to the parents' attention, they immediately did what they could to remove it. And they were planning to they moved him out of that bedroom. But it's things like that that are so important to understand and to mitigate as soon as, and again, when you know better, you have the obligation to do better. Right. And so those of you listening, you're like, oh my gosh, this is like new information. Don't beat yourself up. You didn't know better. So how could you do better? But now you have an obligation to do better.
I love that. Yeah, and that's the thing is I think people do it's going to be hard not to blame yourself, right? In these situations, but it's all about moving forward. And I think sometimes it can be really hard to hear the information that like causes us to take accountability, but it's like this is not to shame the past. This is to give you information moving forward. Okay, I kind of want to take this in some weird direction. So I hope you're ready for this because I have
Totally.
a couple questions that are very untouched territory on this podcast, which is kind of hard to find now. But okay, so I've heard from different sources that there's definitely a conspiracy that a lot of cancer is actually parasites. What are your thoughts on this line of thinking?
That's a great question. And yeah, this is definitely a very valid conversation in the oncology space and amongst a lot of my colleagues. I think that what I will say is parasites love the environment that cancer creates, and
Mm-hmm.
cancer loves the environment parasites create. So while I wouldn't say that like the root to every cancer diagnosis is a parasitic infection, that would be just dumbing down what actually is going on. That's not entirely true. Every cancer is a little unique, but we do know that some of the mechanisms that are used in natural cancer therapy are the same things used to help kill parasites. And
Oh,
so whether that be ivermectin, which, my family, we lived in Mexico for 2 years and we did ivermectin off and on pretty regularly throughout the year just to be proactive and making sure we were lowering that parasitic burden. So there's a lot of research out there showing that we can use antiparasitic remedies, whether that be antiparasitic foods, supplements, or off-label drugs or labeled drugs like ivermectin, fenbendazole, menbendazole. These that are all kind of in that field. I want people to understand something like, for example, lymphoma. Lymphoma is without, I mean, this, please understand, I'm not trying to dumb down this diagnosis, but it's congestion of the lymph is really what we're dealing with. Parasites love congested lymph and they live in congested lymph. And so it is so frustrating to watch, somebody have to be put through chemotherapy and radiation for something that is already really congested with toxicants, including parasites, heavy metals, whatever it is, right? And so that's one of those diagnoses that I really struggle with conventional treatment. Now, I'm not saying kids have to, right? Um, but it just is, it furthers that burden of toxins and parasites love it.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think parasites definitely play a role. When it comes to kids and when I'm working with kids, parents bring this up a lot, like, hey, do I put them on ivermectin? And I'm not a signing provider, so I can never start them on a prescription medication or take them off. But what I educate them is what we want to do. We can't, through active treatment, we can never put them in a parasite cleanse. That would be way too much for their liver.
Yeah.
It burden their little bodies. They're already trying to do so much and process the chemo. And so what we do is we want to keep that toxic burden or that parasitic burden low. And we can do that with anti-parasitic foods. We can do that with detox modalities. We can do that with cleaning up their water, making sure they're not eating pork during treatment.
Mhm.
Nobody should really be eating pork anyways, but especially when you're in a cancering environment and you're, wanting to keep that parasitic burden low. So there's things that we want to focus on to keep it low, but we're not going to necessarily throw them into a crazy detox.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about something like lymphatic massage? Is that problematic? Like, would that spread things or is that helpful?
I would say that is case by case, and it kind of
Mhm.
depends on the individual. I
Okay.
love lymph work during treatment, like rebounding is something I
Yeah.
really encourage. Vibration plate to get the lymph going, but lymphatic massage, it is kind of case by case, depending on the patient and depending on where they're at in treatment and where the major areas of inflammation are.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, 'cause I used to think that that would be like the answer to everything for everyone, right? And then I had a woman on this show who actually went through, like, she had botulism, like poisoning from Botox. And I think it was like her first time getting Botox too. And so I was like, well, would something like gua sha or lymph help? She's like, no, because that spreads the poison. And that's when I realized that it's not for everyone. It's something that I really
Yeah.
enjoy, but obviously not for everyone. So it's interesting to see, to learn about that. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense, and I feel like what you were saying earlier in this episode, a lot of the foods that you'd be eating on a parasite cleanse or avoiding on a parasite cleanse really do line up with what you'd be doing when you're holistically trying to manage cancer as well. So I think at the very least, whether or not somebody's like, yeah, that's a bundle of parasites, at the very least, the lifestyle components are very aligned. And so I really like that. Are there any supplements that people can take in these cases that maybe aren't a parasite cleanse, but are just supportive of detox?
Yeah, actually, one thing I absolutely love when I think of parasites and how to kind of start that process of minimizing them is lemon essential oil.
Ooh,
Um, and you need to be careful with the company you're using because it needs to be one you can actually internalize. Most of them you buy at the store, you can't. But if you use lemon essential oil in a little bit of water, it tastes good. That actually breaks down the biofilm that parasites live in. And so it kind of breaks them out of that so that then if you're hydrated, you're doing things like castor oil packs and detox baths and vibration plate or rebounding and eating healthy, you're able to actually effectively start to manage that parasitic burden. Some people need more of an aggressive push to get them out, but if you start by just breaking open that biofilm, it makes them susceptible to being eliminated. And so that's kind of a
mhm.
simple, like inexpensive step one.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I want to try that now. I don't know if that's pregnancy safe, but
I always say
probably.
with pregnancy, like did I do them once in a while? Yes. But I always play conservative. Like during
Yeah.
pregnancy, you just minimize use of essential oils internally until you've
Hmm.
had the baby. But a little bit of lemon in your water is, yeah, friend
Yeah.
to friend, totally fine.
Yeah, that's where I've been so minimalistic, but I have all the things I just cannot wait to do. Like a coffee enema, forget about it. I fantasize about them. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
I know. And that's a great way to keep the parasite. Kids don't, generally do them.
Yeah.
My husband and I do them all the time, and that is a great way to keep that parasitic burden low.
1000%. Yeah, I'm a huge fan. I like literally for my anniversary last year bought my husband a colonic because I was like, he didn't want to go. And I was like, you're gonna go. This is your gift. Like, we're doing
That's
this.
awesome.
So obviously not doing those now, but cannot wait. The second I get cleared, that is like, at the 6 weeks, I'm like, you can work out, you can have sex again. Like, I'm more excited to do an enema. I'm more excited to put coffee up my butt. How is that possible?
That
But
is
it's
awesome.
fine. Okay, so another really weird, interesting question that I think that you've touched on a little bit before, but I would love to learn more while we still have time. Chemtrails. So I, for the longest time, this has been a really interesting household topic. Like, my family is torn. The women in my family are like, yeah, we know chemtrails are real because we see certain states banning them and they cause cancer and they're horrible for you. And then the men in my family are like, it's a conspiracy theory. They're not real. So I would love to hear from you and your research, especially in the cancer arena. What is your perspective on chemtrails?
Yeah. So I remember when Kicker was first diagnosed, I found the Truth About Cancer series that Ty and Charlene Bollinger put out. This was like a decade ago. And I dug through the videos and the books, and that was the very first time I heard about chemtrails. And ironically, at the time, we were living in Northern California in an area called Mount Shasta, and I'm watching this, they're interviewing this scientist, and he's talking about chemtrails, and he's literally in Mount Shasta, California, saying that this is one of the worst areas because for California, it's the most effective area to spray to have the effect of like the water flow down through the rest of the state. And I'm like, wait, what is this? So I start doing a little bit more research, understanding the heavy metals that are used, and it's all about environmental control and weather control. And so here's the thing, this is what I say. That's something you can't get away from. Like we can't, I mean, I'm sitting out at the beach this weekend in San Diego and like I'm like, wow, those are stripes in the sky. My kids point them out. They're like, Mom, there's those chemtrails again. So can I remove myself from this? Not unless I go back to where we lived in Mexico, which chemtrails are completely illegal in the country of Mexico, by the
Wow.
way.
Awesome.
Mexico's on it about quite a few things. So I can't remove myself from this. Is it real? Yes. I mean, you look at all you have to do is test the soil and then find out just doing a little bit of digging what is actually coming out of those planes and they match. So we can't remove ourselves from it. And this is where we have to just go, okay, this is something I cannot control. But what I can control is what I put in my mouth, the water I'm drinking, the health of the environment in my four walls or, your home, and the detox modalities that I can do every day. That I can control.
Hmm.
So, yes, it's real. Yes, it's toxic. But rather than just like freaking out, I'm like, well, I can't do anything about that. So, I'm going to go all in on controlling the things that I can.
Oh, I love this perspective because, yeah, it's sometimes knowledge, knowledge is power, but sometimes it's also paralyzing. When you know how poisonous the world is, it's really terrifying, especially when you're thinking about raising kids. And so I love your perspective. It does bring a little bit of like, okay, just take a breath, like focus on what you can control because ultimately there's not much we can do about that. I mean, yes, we see things like we see groups coming together and lobbying for a healthier world. And I think that's beautiful and something I definitely want to be a part of and want to make an impact in. But as far as like day to day, right, there's not much we can do. Kind of speaking on that, recently we've seen an executive order about the increased use of glyphosate. I know it's quite nuanced. I know that there is nuance to that in the conversation around it, but there's also a lot of infighting amongst like the MAHA group, right? And in general, I would love to know, like, what's your perspective on what's going on? How do you reduce glyphosate in your own life as we're seeing an increased push of glyphosate in today's society?
Yeah, that's a great question. My first response is I pay very little attention to politics because I
Yeah.
learned years ago that we have zero control over that. Another thing we can't
Yeah.
control, right? Like we can't control politicians, our administration. Everybody was so excited about RFK. I was like, yeah, great, awesome. We'll see how this goes. It's just another
Hmm.
politician.
Yep.
So I kind of wipe my hands clean, don't pay much attention. However, how do I, again, control what I can control? And that starts 100% with food and water. So this is why we have to filter our water, and Britas don't count. I can't tell you how
Mhm.
many times people are like, "Oh, I have a Brita," or I have my fridge has a filter. I'm like, your fridge doesn't filter out glyphosate. It doesn't filter out all the heavy metals that are present in your water. So
Mhm.
water filtration, number one. I'm a fan of distilled water, which is fairly controversial. A lot of people don't think that's great water. It is proven to be the most effective um, filter. It filters out 99.9% of everything. So clean water in your home, and then food. So the easiest way to avoid glyphosate is avoiding processed foods, gluten, unless you were doing like traditional sourdough and using organic flour or freshly milled wheat berries, however you do it. And then making sure you are consuming only organic animal products.
Mhm.
Now, will you be able to completely avoid glyphosate? 100% no, because we live in an imperfect world, and the organic farm is next to the non-organic farm. So there's always going to be a little bit of rollover. But
Mhm.
again, that's nuance. So how do we step back and go, but what can I control? And when I literally watch on lab work, levels change when people are changing what they're exposing themselves to and when they're on protocols to help detox that out. So they're still living in the same world that we are, but they're just being more intentional. So it is totally possible to minimize that burden of glyphosate through your diet and your water.
I love that. Yeah, water filtration major. So aside from distilled, like, are you a fan of like the Berkey? I know that one's like people are very hot or cold about it.
Yeah, I it never did quite enough for me. Gosh, it's so much better than nothing. Like
Yeah.
if you were to be like, well, that's all I have. Great. That's so much better than not having anything or having a Brita or having your fridge filter. And then it just became difficult to purchase the water filters because of the legalities. I know that there was some question around they were finding certain toxins that they promised they were filtering. So I just never really bought into all of the hype. We have used a Berkey off and on over the years until the last probably 5 years. I actually use mine now as my water holder because it's pretty and that's where I put my distilled water in.
Yeah.
Um, again, it's done is better than none. So it's a for sure better than not having anything. And a lot of
Hmm.
people ask me, well, what about RO? And RO is fine, but it doesn't remove as much as distilled.
Okay. That's really good to know. Yeah, I definitely want to get, I mean, I'm pretty into my like water filtration already, but I really want to. We're looking to move in the next couple months, which is crazy timing. But I really want to just like take it to the next level as well. So that's always something I'm looking out for. And I have not heard that distilled is the best for glyphosate. So that's really, really interesting. What about your yard? This is, this one's a hot topic because I feel like everyone and their aunt and uncle are all spraying Roundup all over their yards. And, I understand wanting a beautiful yard, but like, do you find options are out there that are not toxic to help with your just upkeep of your space outside?
Yeah, that's a good question. Gosh, I probably wouldn't be the expert in this area because I mean we live at the beach.
Nice.
Um,
Yeah.
so we don't really have a we don't have a yard. But over the years, we lived on a property for a period of time that was 5 acres of grass. And prior to us purchasing, they had definitely used chemicals on it, but we didn't use chemicals on it. My husband just mowed it and thankful for weather in California. We're fortunate to have great weather, so it would rain and keep it green. And I remember he would use like for gophers and moles, things like that. He would use this is horrible for any animal activists out there, but whatever the gum, juicy fruit gum, he would put in their holes, because apparently that's really toxic to them. So it's like, well, that's better than using the poisons. I'm like, my
Yeah.
family comes before the animals. So sure, are there ways? Absolutely. And now there's so much information on the internet. There's so many people in this movement that we're in of trying to create healthy homes and healthy yards. But I would definitely say, please do not use glyphosate in your yard and don't use Terminex like insecticides on the outside of your house. God forbid the inside of your house. Like these are all really important steps to clean up your environment.
Absolutely. Especially if you have kids. Oh my gosh. And dogs. I think about it all the time. I finally got my parents to agree to like work on finding a natural solution to their yard work. So I'm like, my dog goes out there. But now that I'm pregnant, I'm like, but I don't want my baby out there. And so now they're like, okay, we'll listen. So I'm like, thank
Awesome.
goodness, because I this has been years of battle of me trying so hard to change their minds on it. So I'm really grateful. So I would love to know, Season. One question I love to end every chat with every expert is, what is your current health and wellness goal?
Oh, that's good. I like that question. Um, I would actually right now, I think my current health and wellness goal is optimizing my understanding and education around peptides. And that's
Mm,
more for personal and friend use. A lot of my friends ask me all the time, and I'm exploring with them and playing with them, and but I don't feel educated yet to teach about them or to really understand how to explain them and recommend. But it's kind of fun. It's like this whole, biohacking thing that like is not new, but become a little bit more popular and more widely available.
yeah.
And so, yeah, right now I think my goal is finding the time outside of studying my clients' files and functional labs and all of that to optimize that really selfishly. Like I want to make sure my family we're using peptides to maximize our health and friends and then if it does roll into clients, obviously kiddos, we're not doing a lot of that with, especially during a cancering process, but it's a fascinating area that I'm really excited to kind of learn more about.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to see where that goes because, yeah, it's definitely newer on the like mainstream scene. So I'm excited to see what it leads to and what we discover through all of this as well. Which, yeah, obviously not trying anything new supplement wise now, or injection
Yeah,
wise now, but it gives me some time to like see what everyone else is doing as well. So it's great.
totally. Yeah, when you get through, by the time you're done breastfeeding, I'm sure you'll have like, oh wow, I'm glad I didn't do that, or I'm glad
Yeah.
I can do this.
Oh yeah, dissertations on everything. That's going to be the
Yep.
best. Well, where can people find you? Where can people connect with you and your different organizations and just companies if they also need the support that you provide?
Yeah. So the best place to find me where I'm most active is Instagram. It's just at Season Johnson. I have my website, which is seasonjohnson.com. Our private practice is biodynamicwellness.com. We also are on Instagram at Biodynamic Wellness. And then our nonprofit is kickcancermovement.org. Also on Instagram at KickCancerMovement. And really, I'm not a gatekeeper. I provide so many free resources, like just there's over 400,000 kids every year diagnosed with cancer. And if we could reach even 10% of them and give them hope with one of our resources, like that is our goal. And so, yeah, message me there or connect with us somehow on one of those platforms. But there's a lot of great information on there. And I'm relaunching my podcast soon, which they'll find on my website as well. So,
Phenomenal. Well, you guys make sure to check out Season, even if you don't have, the current struggle of walking through cancer in your family. The best form of treatment is prevention, in my opinion. So I think she's a great follow. So much good information, especially if you're starting a family or thinking about starting a family, as I know so many of you ladies listening are. You guys, I hope you loved this episode and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Until next time, we will chat soon.